Okay, I am so excited. You guys, look who I have with me in the podcast studio today. It's Mancub number 3, Judah Simons, who you all have prayed over, asked about. I mean, we have gotten letters and emails, gifts, and lots of prayers since his accident mid-September. And I had him home for a few days, and so I asked him, "Can I interview you for the podcast so that we can tell our friends and all the folks who've supported us online what the journey's been like?" And so, welcome to the podcast, honey.
Thank you for having me.
Isn't it fun? Is this the first time we've had a podcast conversation?
I think so.
It's your
Yeah.
debut.
It's my debut.
Do you
Yeah.
think you'd ever start a podcast?
I think so.
What
But
would it be on if you started a podcast?
probably the human body because that's the only thing I know.
Right? I mean, the trajectory was like that you have been interested in PT and physical therapy,
Yeah.
which, I mean, now you're like an expert because you're working through your own pain and struggles, right?
Yeah, I'd say so, but not fully.
Okay, so for anyone who might be tuning in for the first time, you don't need to go into every detail necessarily, but give a quick account of what happened on September 22nd, was it?
21st.
21st, September 21st.
Yeah. Saturday. It was the 21st. Liam and I were out mountain biking, probably like 8 o'clock ish, and super fun trail that we already done first. Just went up to a jump and saw my nose plummet, and next thing I knew, I was on the ground. I hit my head. And
You
then
went over the handlebars, right? You
Yep,
think
over the
you did.
handlebars. I think so. I don't
I
really
mean,
recall that much, but next thing I knew, I was probably like yelling out for Liam. He supported my back for 45 minutes until Coast Guard came, and then
Okay, so real
went to
quick
the
though.
hospital.
So, first of all, Liam was ahead of you, so he didn't see
Yeah.
everything that happened. Just in case all the mamas who are listening and are worried, you were wearing a helmet. You were wearing,
Yes.
you were protected like you ought to be. You were in a
Yes.
high grade helmet. It's just that you do what's called downhill mountain biking, right?
Yeah.
And that particular kind of mountain biking is one where you sometimes have slopes and jumps and you just hit it wrong.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm used to that sort of thing, and I didn't know why my body decided to.
But you probably
not-
blinked out, right?
Yeah,
As you were
prob-
flying through the
yes, I
air.
was
It
not
wasn't like
thinking.
slow-mo. It wasn't like
Yeah.
you saw the clouds or anything, right?
Yeah,
You blinked out
Yeah.
and you landed. And so what was going through your mind? As soon as you became conscious and you were like yelling out for Liam, what were the thoughts going through your head? What did you think was happening?
Uh,
Did you think
I
it was
think-
as serious as it
Yes.
ended up being? You
More
knew
so
it was
than
that
all,
serious?
than all my other injuries. If you
Like,
guys
you
must know,
knew?
I have had a lot.
I've
of
never
injuries,
broken
but-
my back, so clearly, well, I've hardly broken much, and so I don't know what it feels like to be like, oh, this is it. Like, this is really a big deal. How
Yeah.
did you know that you shouldn't just like power through it, get up, and just like try to walk
Well,
out of there?
like, if I could, like, relating to like my other injuries, like a broken scapula, I didn't know, like, at the time that I had broken it. It was just more of like, oh, I see my shoulder dip down a little bit more than usual, and it hurts. But like, as soon as I landed on the ground, I was like, I feel a really sharp pain in my back. Like, I knew something was up. It was like a burning hot sensation in my
Were you scared?
back. Yeah, like at first, I think the fear settled in after like 10 minutes worth. Like,
When they weren't coming quick
yeah,
enough, right?
like,
And also, you
yes,
guys were
sort
in the
of.
hills where an ambulance wasn't gonna like pull up. There wasn't like
Yeah.
like a road, or there was no paved road in that area, right? That's
Yeah,
why you
I mean,
had.
yeah, the
search and
closest
rescue.
ambulance was 20 minutes away, so it was just really hard.
But you
for
ended
the
up waiting
ambulance to come.
45 minutes
Yeah,
for the search and rescue helicopter to take you
Yeah.
to an ambulance, right?
because
Is
it was
that how
actually, it was not the ambulance people that came, it was actually the Coast Guard and the helicopter that responded first. But yeah, I mean, saying like the fear kicked in really bad when I was like hearing that that they were on their way. I could hear the sirens, but then I was like waiting 10 more minutes, still hearing them, but no one came. And I mean, I'm using my left hand. I'm sitting on my right side and like fist in the ground trying to keep stability.
Mm,
And after like 30 minutes of that, I was barely able to hold on.
yeah.
I was like, I don't know how many times. I think it was like 10 times. I was just like, Liam, let me go on my back, please. It was just like,
And Liam,
just
was he
misery.
was he gentle about it? I mean, he's told us that
Oh
he
my
wouldn't
goodness,
let you
yeah.
move.
He was probably the most gentle that I've ever
What
seen him.
tell me, like, can you reenact like what he said to you? Because
Like,
he doesn't share that
yeah,
much, so I didn't really know like what, and he probably can't recall what he said. So can you
yeah.
recall
I
what
mean,
he
the
said?
first time uh, Liam came up, and a couple people that we had met prior actually rolled up behind us, and they were freaking out a little bit. But Liam walked over, and I was not emotional, but I was like moaning. I was just like, Liam, can we pray? Liam, can we pray?
Oh,
And we immediately prayed on the spot. Um,
I love that you
like
turned to prayer first.
while everyone was like calling an ambulance and stuff, Liam was just holding my hand, and we were praying. Um,
Mm.
and then he was like super gentle. He was asking me what to do.
He's super good under
Yeah,
pressure. I think he's really
super
good.
good under pressure. I've never seen him like more attentive, but also like super gentle.
Mm.
But yeah,
He was so wise to not let you move out of that position.
oh my goodness,
I
yeah,
mean, we've heard repeatedly, time and time again, how doctors told us that sometimes the adrenaline kicks in and you just like try to get yourself moving and then find out later that you pinched like the broken, bones, pinched a nerve, your spine collapses or whatever happens, and you end up actually damaging your ability to all your nerves, and
yeah,
you end up paralyzed. And I I mean, I kind of joked about this, but I was like, I'm kind of the mom after having six boys where I tend to be like, hey, toughen up. Like, you can do this. Grab your bike
yeah,
and put it over your shoulders and we'll like walk out of here.
yeah,
And I don't know that I would have said that to you, but I just mean like, it would have been tempting for me to be like, are you sure, honey? Are you sure
yeah,
it's hurting that bad? Now, granted, if you had gone over the handlebars and I seen it, I would have freaked out too, but I wasn't there.
yeah,
And so I'm really glad that Liam had the wherewithal and the foresight and even just the wisdom to pray with you, be gentle with you, and to keep you still until somebody
yeah,
professional came along. You
yeah.
know?
I have so much to thank for him. I mean, he was the only one that allowed me to like stay on my side and not be on my back at the end. So
So speaking of Liam, I mean, so Liam's your older brother. You have
yeah,
two older brothers. He's the one that's a junior in college, and
hmm
so you're a freshman. And this was 3 weeks into freshman year.
yeah,
Obviously, you guys were really close friends as you guys grew up together. But going off to college, this was like a new thing and a new relationship. So I'm curious, like, do you think there's a change now with the way you see him, or is there any is there anything new about your relationship now after the accident
mm.
since before that? Like, is there anything that you feel like has changed or has grown?
It's a good question. I think like last year was like the main bonding of like he and I got really close. He and I started talking on the phone and having
Hmm.
deeper questions. But I think after my injury, I noticed a lot more of like I think both he and I just like really couldn't wrap our brains around the fact that an injury like mine could be just out of thin air.
Yeah.
Um, it like
It just
yeah,
happened.
I
It was a
mean
fluke.
something of a jump like that is what I do all the time. It's not out of the ordinary,
Hmm.
but it happened. And I think he and I really valued like being very attentive to how we are. Like we're constantly asking each other like, how are you doing? What can I help you with?
Mm.
Um, and through that, it's been a lot more of like engaging in conversations. And it's not that like I mean, we're always talking all the time about bikes and dirt bikes and everything, but I think he and I bonded really, really close after the injury, and it's been really cool actually going through college with him.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
been
he
a
was the one who went to the first trauma unit with you and then
yeah,
got transported to the other trauma unit at
yeah,
another hospital when Baba and I were getting on the plane to fly over to you guys.
hmm
So he was like the the only other family member that was there to help check you in to the hospital,
Yeah.
to give them all the information about you. And he, you know, as a side note, it was weeks later that he said, I actually feel like I, I went back to my room after you guys came, because when Baba and I came, we relieved him. He went back to classes. He
Hmm.
went back to school. We stayed at the hospital, and he said, I just kind of broke down for a little bit. I had to like have a moment because he had been holding it all together for so long, you know?
Wow, I didn't know
So,
that.
yeah, it was emotionally really, and he's somebody who just doesn't process emotions in the moment. And so he's going to stay
Yeah.
really positive, really calm. But then when he was alone, when came and we were like stable and like the
Yeah.
parents were here, he went back to his dorm room and he said he just like really just had to like
Yeah.
kind of get a grip for a little bit and stuff. So,
Hmm.
I'll tell our listeners and viewers what you told me. I don't know if you even remember. I mean, they did have you on some pain meds and stuff, but right before, because you were in the hospital for a few days before the MRI and the surgery was prescribed, and you needed a major spinal fusion, which included rods and screws. And ultimately, and we don't need to get into all the details about it, but ultimately it was kind of a risky surgery, in part because of your anatomy and the way it wasn't going to be a super easy and super textbook operation. And I was really trying to be calm for most of it. And I remember right before you were getting wheeled to the OR, the operating room, I like couldn't help it. I just started crying because I'm a mom, and I was just like, here we are. Like it's finally here. And even though my brain knew like we're in really good hands, we're like literally at, a wonderful hospital with one of the top surgeons. Like everything was great. Like we knew this was, and we had prayer support, but I was kind of just like a basket case, like losing it. And do you remember what you said to me?
Yeah.
Okay, can you tell
Um,
everybody what you said?
I mean, up until that point, I was like praying and praying and praying, and when you started breaking down a little bit, I was just like, hey, Mama, like, whatever happens, happens. You know, it's just the Lord's plan, and gotta trust Him through all of that. And that really, I mean,
And you actually
yeah,
said one more thing. You said, this is God's moment.
yeah,
I will never forget that. You literally said, this is God's moment. And I was like, yeah, this is not like I can't do anything about it. I can't. It actually reminded me of a lot of how I felt when I was carrying each of you boys in my womb. Like
hmm,
when I was pregnant with you boys, I could take care of you. I could eat right. I could exercise. I could sleep well. I could go to all my doctor's appointments. But at the end of the day, I just can't. I'm not the one holding you together. Like
hmm,
you were being knit and formed by Creator God, and the Lord had your life in His hands. And this was that same feeling all over again. Like it's
yeah,
God's moment. He's the creator. We're not the ones in charge, you know? And
yeah,
so, one of the wild things about you saying that was I don't know that any of our listeners and viewers could imagine just how much you were going through right then. But at that time, they were holding your neck in a brace. You were in pain constantly. You couldn't function without pain meds. But you had a broken rib on top of multiple burst fractures and multiple crushed vertebrae, all the things. But then on top of that, you had like blood in your eye and you couldn't see well. And it was like kind of turning into like a fear that you could be going blind because they couldn't have an ophthalmologist. They didn't have an
hmm,
ophthalmologist. And then you had like, I'm exaggerating, but pounds of rocks in your left ear. Was it your left ear or both
yeah,
ears?
left ear,
I mean, we finally got the last 6 rocks out last week during Thanksgiving. I mean, it was that hard for them to get. So you couldn't hear, you couldn't see, you had like rocks down in your inner canal, and it just was messing with your sense of stability. It was just a lot of
yeah,
stuff going on, and you were having a hard time breathing. It was just hurting to breathe. And even then you were just calm, and it made me realize that like right before you went to college, you'd been walking with the Lord, but you made a really solid public profession of faith where you said, "Hey, I walk with the Lord and I have been, but I want to be baptized. And you read your testimony, you shared your heart in front of our local church congregation. And that moment when you said, this is God's moment, and you held my hand, and oh, like just even thinking about it right now, I'm like, we joke that you're such a mama's boy, but I'm such a Judah mama, like I'm such a baby that you like hold my hand and you were like, Mama, it's going to be okay. It's God's moment. And all I could think about was, praise the Lord that your faith wasn't built at the hospital only, that it was there was already a foundation. You'd already dealt with other things in life that already caused you to say, hey, I need to trust the Lord more than I trust myself. I need to walk with the Lord and not chase after things that are not honoring to him. And those patterns prepared you for a moment where did you actually, I mean, people have asked me this question, so I'll ask it to you, and there's not a right or wrong answer to this. I'll just say, because you've not been warned about this question, but I want the honest truth. And did you wrestle with that question of like, why me? God, why'd you let this happen to me? Did you ask that? Did you struggle with that actual question right then and there?
I'd say so, like in a yes and no situation. I'd say not in the sense of like, why me? Like lamenting. I think that was like after, during recovery.
Oh, recovery was so hard. Yeah.
Was really hard. It still is. But I think like during the trauma section and I'm in the hospital, like, I mean, I'm probably bringing it up probably before the surgery. It was just like, it was really having to wrap my head around of like, okay, I got to accept that if I get paralyzed, then I get paralyzed. Or like if I have constant nerve damage and I have, numb skin for the rest of my life, it's fine. And
which you do still.
Which I still do, yeah. I mean, it's constant and it's irritating. But it's just like the fact that I had to trust the Lord in that moment. It was really, I probably like, I probably have never been closer in prayer and like just peace of just being in faith and trust in the Lord. One, I think it was just because I had to really accept, like, just whatever happens. Like, I mean, you don't know the answer. You don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the surgeon said, it's going to be a fine surgery, done it multiple times, but it ended up
but then that
breaking
surgeon,
through, untouching.
But then that surgeon also came into the room and said, hey, we need to make sure together that he can wiggle his toes,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously, we don't need to go into all the details of that surgery, but it was a scary moment. We all held our breath for a long time. And when you finally came out of the anesthesia and you wiggled your toes, I mean, I don't think you were celebrating like we were celebrating because you were so out of it.
I was so drugged
but
up.
the truth is, even now, we recognize that your life and all of our lives are in the Lord's hands. And just because, I mean, with each week passing and seeing your progress, obviously it makes us really encouraged. But even then, we were like, I don't know, day one, a few hours later, if he wiggles his toes, that's a good sign. But there's a lot of unknowns still, a lot of that. Yeah. And so no matter what part of that journey, and you just brought up a little while ago about how it was the recovery that was the hardest. I actually think you're right. I think when we were at the hospital, there was round the clock care. We felt confident that doctors and nurses were telling us the right things, and we were working with that. But once we got you home to recover and the pain was out of this world and you weren't sleeping well, and just all the complications were happening, and the discouragement, right? The discouragement of being 3 weeks into your freshman year of college.
Yeah.
What do you think was the biggest mental struggle during recovery? What was the constant thing that you had to fight in your mind and in your heart?
Probably go slow.
Because you just wanted to rush the process?
I am such a person. I mean, you know me. Yeah, I'm very much the go-getter, similar to Baba. I think I'm just very much of like, if I have a desire or passion in my mind that I want to do, I immediately do it. like if it's really strong in my head, then I really want to do it. And getting back into, you know, sports of mountain biking again, or being able to walk like for that matter, like I was not able to walk properly. I was not able to bend down and pick up stuff.
You had been also weight
I
training
mean,
for
yeah,
quite a bit. And
I was weight training and I was doing all these things that I've just had so much of a passion for. And to have that like just nodded and stopped was very hard for me during recovery. I think being like, I kind of compare it, I think in the surgery and hospital, I think that was more fear and like just being scared because, you know, you and Bob left at night. You guys weren't with me all night. I was also like, had a duration of like an hour and a half where I was not on medication. I couldn't have medication. So I was just like trying to sleep, but I mean, the pain was unbearable. But I think when recovery came, it was pain and it was annoyance and it was just all the struggles of emotions because I was just like, wow, I'm in a brace constantly. I mean, I have nerve pain that feels like I'm like just, I have shattered ribs. And I mean, I did have a broken rib, but I mean, it was just all the things adding up to make emotions just more difficult to control. But I think what helped a lot was actually you guys. A lot was the fact that you guys were super caring. You guys were like constantly reminding me of like, Jude, it's gonna be okay. Like, we're gonna get through it. Your time is coming where you're gonna get back into your stuff. Just gotta trust the process. And
your brothers were
yeah,
quite amazing too. I mean,
yeah,
one of the most encouraging things for me was actually seeing Stone and Liam both like sacrifice sleep, and both of them would either set an alarm or listen for you, and they would come downstairs because you were sleeping in the living room, and they would come down. And one night one of them was like, there's not that much I can do for him, but when he's moaning, I just want to come down and just keep him company and just make sure he knows he's not alone. And then another time, one of them was like, well, he needs somebody to walk him to the bathroom if he needs to take a bathroom break, because you couldn't, there's no way you could have walked by
yeah,
yourself, you know.
yeah. And I mean, the day before I left, that was clear to not. I mean, like not have to have the brace on when using the bathroom and stuff, and the fact that like I could. I mean, I remember now, like I couldn't even like walk properly, couldn't stand or whatever. It just was like like just really not what I'm used to.
Was it
So
hard to be dependent on other people? Was it hard?
yes,
Because here's the thing, everybody who knows our family and knows you knows that Judah is the servant of the house. Like, he's the doer. I mean, if there's a table to be cleaned off, no one cleans it better than you. If it's like, oh, we got to get ready for a church and we got to be all hands on deck and clean up, it's like vacuumed before somebody else even got up to get ready. Like, you're just like on it. And you're such a doer and a servant. Like, you're somebody who welcomes me in the morning with a cup of coffee before I even ask for it, because that's the way you are. And so you're wired to be like a hands-on, servant-hearted, do sacrifice, you know, behind the scenes kind of person. And so when you're injured and you can't make breakfast, can't make coffee, can't clean up, can't serve other people, all the ways in which you love other people, what was that like to feel like dependent on other people?
I mean, I think you really answered it, and just all the things you characterized me by, and it was miserable. I think it was really hard because I mean, I don't want to like make cleaning sound like it's an enjoyment, and I'm just
I mean,
naturally
all
done
the
it.
girls
But
who are listening to
yeah,
this are probably like, boys who clean. You know, I
I
mean,
mean,
that's what I hear.
it's my
It's
main desire to be like back to washing dishes. Honestly,
you
the fact
crack
that I
me up.
couldn't even touch dishes and load the dishwasher, or I mean, make your morning coffee and stuff. Like
Yeah,
it was just like it's not me. Like
yeah.
really taking it slow. It's not like I'm like bad at going slow. It's just I'm never going slow. I'm never really like take a step back and really go at a slug pace. Because that's what I had to
Yeah.
do. I really had to go from, you know, doing all these fun things to just going super slow with life.
So that really leads me to like some of the closing questions I have for you. Is it what you just described is some forced required idleness. Like you were like forced to be idle and to like kind of sit in neutral, like not do a whole lot. You couldn't make progress with school. You couldn't hang out with your friends. You, even if a friend from our town, like locally, came and sat with you, half the time you were so exhausted that you would be like falling asleep while somebody came to visit you, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
And so you weren't doing any of the things that you were like charged up and ready to do. If the boys went on a bike ride, you obviously couldn't go with them. You
Mm-hmm.
couldn't like, I mean, for my birthday, we tried to go on a family like our typical outing where we ride in a car and we go somewhere, see some beautiful sights, and then we ended up at a sushi restaurant. And you ended up having to go wait in the car because it was so painful to even sit in a restaurant in a chair. And so I think with idleness, and for anyone who's listening, I would say there are a lot of people who, some people will be like, I totally relate to what they're talking about today because I've gone through something really difficult physically. But there are others who maybe don't relate to surgery or a life detour like that. But there's that sense of like the unexpected happened, something really difficult, either physically or mentally happened. But now I'm in a place where I have to deal with a mental struggle. I have to deal with like an emotional struggle because idleness, like what you, if your schedule gets emptied, right? And lots of people felt this way during COVID, where suddenly everything that you are usually busy with is gone, and you're sitting there with all this time and all this like nothingness, and you actually have to choose what to put back into your life, right? Because if you just stay on neutral and stay in idle, what fills your mind is actually things like negative thoughts
Mm-hmm.
or lies or temptations or lots of things are just not helpful. So what do you think, and I don't know exactly your answer to this, and if you don't have a, you can think about it, but what do you feel like, and maybe you're still in the middle of it, but what do you think has been like, what have you learned about, you know, dealing with your emotions and your um, mental challenges when you don't get to do all the things that you're used to doing? What do you have to do to mentally like address yourself and remind yourself? And how do you stay out of unproductive things and input productive things in your life when you're kind of in idle? You're not as in idle now, but you're still
Yeah.
not going on bike rides. You're still not able to lift weights. You're still not able to do a lot of things that
Yeah.
you've been used to doing for 18 years.
If I, this might sound funny, but especially like the whole gym aspect of like wanting to get back in lifting weights and stuff. A really like fun thing that I've been just slowly doing recently is like looking back at old pictures of myself. Um, that might sound like, oh my goodness, you suck at gym, bro, and whatever. But I think that builds motivation of like positivity, like looking at it from a place of like, yeah, I'm suffering right now, but I'm honestly gonna be back to where that is. And there's fun times where I'm like, I may be better than that guy right there.
Hmm.
And I'm looking at my old self that was like, I mean, the week of my injury. And I look at myself, I'm like, oh, we're gonna be better than that. And
Because you're at your
yeah,
peak weight, like you were like actually, for
yeah,
girls, by the way, we don't want to be at our like,
yeah,
we don't want to be at the highest weight
yeah,
ever, but you wanted to be
yeah.
at the
I
highest weight,
was like at 182
and you were
pounds, and then I
celebrating that.
dropped right down to 158, and I got uber depressed. But I mean, the fact that like, I mean, yeah, being really like losing a lot of weight, having no appetite, then to look at a picture of myself that was like huge and healthy and probably no injuries at the point, it's like, yeah, we have an injury, but we're gonna be better than that, and we're gonna get back to where we were, if not better. And then just like I mean, just prayer, just praying that like the emotions would be blotted out, because me, I get a little bit angry and impatient on when I'm not making progress. It gets very like I just get really tense, and um, that oftentimes leads me to like just not being in the right spot mentally. And so praying through that and asking the Lord to just continue to show his goodness um, that helped, and that continues to be like my desire is.
Do you
Uh,
think gratitude had a part in this? Like, do you feel like recalling things that you were grateful for? And when you talk about looking at photos, and I feel like you and your brothers find a lot of joy in recounting good memories by listening to music that reminds you of God's
yeah,
goodness. I mean, you've sent us several really great worship songs that um, I feel like during that season was when you were listening to City of Lights,
yeah.
His Glory and My Good,
I was
which
about to bring that up.
I mean, if you haven't heard that song, City of Light, thank you for writing it, because His Glory and My Good, they're not they're not in contradiction with one another.
Mm,
And in your life, it could feel like, wow, how does God get the glory? And how is this my good when I'm suffering and going
yeah.
through this? But that reminder to keep being thankful of like, God, I know you're good. I know your
Hmm.
character. Even if I'm going through something I can't make sense of, even if I'm not out of the woods, with
Yeah.
air quotes. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it might be a struggle. You might continue to have struggles. And it's not that you necessarily think, oh, life will start on the other side of me being back at 183 pounds or being back in the gym. That may or may not ever happen.
Hmm.
But mentally, you're actually choosing a different mindset, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I actually haven't told you this, but like during the hospital, um, my number one prayer that I would always have with me was, I know that I'm physically incapable of being a light, but let me be a light in any
Mm.
form, in any way I can, because it doesn't ultimately have to be me doing something. It can be me.
Mm.
There's any way, like any form of bringing glory to the Lord is just being a light. And I really just sought the Lord. I was like, let me just be an example of who you want me to be. Of
Mm.
like, let my character show your wisdom and love for me, but also for the whole world. And understanding that it's not me who's doing any of it. It's not me who's ultimately like making myself feel better physically, or making the cartilage in my back happen. It's all the Lord. And understanding that like I was so undeserving of that. I was so undeserving of having a chance of walking again. But the fact that the Lord had grace and mercy and love for me,
Mm.
kind of just like, wow, like maybe rethink your life a little bit. And it was not like I was in a bad time, but I think it came at a good time of like the understanding that like anything that happens, my heart needs to be in a place that is willing. And like that's part of my mission, is like I've been given a purpose now through my injury to be aware of that and aware of like, wow, I can't control my life.
Mm.
Like even if I wake up the next day, I have no promise
Mm.
of maybe seeing the end of it. But I have to have my heart centered on the Lord constantly.
It's a powerful lesson to learn at any age, but especially at 18, as your mom, I can't even begin to tell you how proud I am that you're learning that lesson now because it will shape your life. Like, I mean, what you are talking about, I spend years writing books about, right? Trying to help, a reader maybe grasp and grapple with like um, how to view God and how to walk in trust in Him. And I'm so grateful to see you working that out in your own life and living that out. And you were light. I'd say you were an encouragement to Papa and I, even at the hospital. But it was shocking how many nurses and people who came into contact with you just said, that kid's really special. And he, you know, all the nurses that came back to check on you over and over again when you weren't in their department anymore, they still came and made sure that you were okay and people loved you. So
Yeah.
super, super grateful. Well, to end our time, I, Judah, I would just say, Mama does this podcast because I'm not even like a natural born podcaster. I don't necessarily want to talk into a microphone or a camera, but I do this because somebody on the other side may be hurting. Somebody may be going through something they didn't
Hmm.
expect to go through. I do this so that we can work out God's grace in our everyday lives. And if we have a chance to reach one person listening or watching with a testimony of how God is faithful, how we can walk with Him, um, that's going to be worth the time. And
Yeah.
so, if somebody is listening right now and maybe they didn't break their back, I hope they didn't, or they didn't, go over the handlebars, they're not going through something like that, but maybe they're going through something where they go, I never wanted this. This is not the way it was supposed to be. I am hurting. I physically hurt. I emotionally hurt. What is one encouragement you could give somebody who is going through something that's going to take a long time to recover from? What would you say to encourage them?
Oh,
I know it's kind of a big question. I'm sorry.
I think, I mean, I'm only one person out of it, but I think one thing that just helped me like really come to terms and find honestly like the joy of being in injury and like plowing through it is understanding how loving the Lord is. Like I I look at the scar every day. I look at my helmet that has scratches on it and dings, and like I saw the rocks that were pulled out of my ear. Like I was so undeserving of being able to walk again. And the fact that the Lord like allowed that. His grace is so much more than I can ever comprehend. And that puts a bit of a new perspective in your life when you know that every step, physical step, every movement of your body is allowed by the Lord. And to anyone who's paralyzed or whatever, like I should be paralyzed, but the fact that the Lord has allowed us to live a new day.
That whatever
And
breath that we've been
yeah,
given,
every
right?
breath that we take is by the Lord. And I think that is so powerful of understanding that I'm not so undeserving. Every day, every promise that I've been given, I'm going to say, thank you, Lord, for this. Like, thank you for giving me this breath that I'm so undeserving of. And with this breath, I'm going to serve you. I'm going to do everything that my body is allowed to serve you and to be a light for you. I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm wrestling with that every day, but I think that is so powerful to understand is like, you might not love the current situation, but there's someone who's so much more loving than you'll ever know. And he promises peace, and he promises a new day. So
I've told you this before, but you went into surgery the day before Home is Right Where You Are launched out into the world. And when I wrote that, the goal was for each of you boys and anyone who reads it to recognize that our shepherd, the good and loving care, the shepherd of our souls, the shepherd of Psalm 23, God, goes with us everywhere we go. There's not a scary valley that we could go through. There's not enemies at our back. There's nothing that we can experience that isn't under the hand and care of our loving Father when we walk with Him and when we're in Christ. And so, as I hear you say that, I just feel like the best encouragement really is know that you are loved, know that you are created to have a relationship with Jesus, because when you know you're at home with God, you really can't go anywhere or experience anything outside of his care. And that even if it's really hard, you know that he's with you and that he's not going to waste a thing.
Yeah. And another just a good point is like that whole Psalm 23 of like, even though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You are not the only one who's walking through the darkness. There's someone out there who's probably going through harder stuff than you. And you're not alone. You're never alone. There's someone out there praying for you who's wrestling with harder things or maybe less, but understanding that someone out there is going through the same struggles as you is comforting, honestly. It's really comforting knowing that, like, these life struggles are not just for me. Like, they're for everybody. So.
Well, I feel like the luckiest mom in the world to get to hear you share those things. And I just know that the Lord is just getting started with all that he will do in and through you. And so thanks for sharing your story, our story, sharing all that you've grown in. I know that it will be a blessing to our listeners, and who knows what someone is going through on the other side, but I know your testimony will mean a lot. So I love you. Thanks
Love
for
you
being
too.
with me.
Thank you so much.